Hi, I'm Chris Martirano with American Music and Sound, here with our great friends at Craft Music, the home of those fantastic bundles, offering you amazing value. I'm going to be showing you Kurzweil's PC4. This is a powerhouse workstation, loaded with amazing features. One of the great things they've done with this much power is to bring it up to an elegant interface that's simple to use and very intuitive. We'll see just how easy it is to use as we get into using the instrument. One of the things that I want to point out is that there's a new action on the keyboard that they've never used before. This is a MIDI action, not a FITAR action, and it's a hammer-weighted action. Very nice. Also featuring aftertouch. The PC4 features a beautiful interface with this gorgeous display, 9 faders, 9 knobs, 9 switches, a variation button, of course, pitch and mod wheel. The PC4 features 256 voices of polyphony, again, another first for Kurzweil. Also, the award-winning KD Effects has 32 effects units, so it's very powerful as their flagship, the Forte. And in fact, it shares the same architecture as the Forte with a couple of exceptions. The PC4 has 2 gigabytes of internal sound memory that Kurzweil has filled up with pianos, electric pianos, clavs, organs, brass, all of that, plus a lot of synthesizer patches and pads. Plus it has 2 gigabytes for users to load their own sounds in. Now, when you compare that with the Forte has 16 gigs of sound memory of Kurzweil sounds loaded in and 3.3 gigabytes of memory the user can use. So there's certainly a difference between the two. Also on the PC4, they have removed the EQ from dedicated knobs and the compressor also from the front panel. And as you can see, they've moved the pitch and mod wheel up to the top panel and removed the cheek block. This is actually great because you can put this instrument in the back seat of almost any car now, which is wonderful. If you're a gigging musician, you're going to love that. Also, a couple of the other differences. They have provided you now with 1/4-inch TRS inputs on the back, in addition to the 2 stereo pair outputs. So you can now plug 1/4-inch balanced inputs in, a stereo pair, and run external gear through the PC4, which is very, very cool. The PC4 has the ability to allow you to search for sounds based on categories, or you can enter a number from the alphanumeric keypad, or you can actually set up an alternative way of listing your programs in the order you want called quick access banks. The quick access banks are accessed from the display by pressing the view button, in which case the display will change from a single sound to showing you then sounds that are parked at various locations underneath, and then a touch of the keypad will call up the alternate listed sounds. You can have multiple banks, I believe it's 99 banks of these quick access sounds. So for your live performance, it makes stepping through multis or single programs very, very easy. The PC4 also features Kurzweil's proprietary tone wheel organ modeling called KB3, in which case the 9 sliders become drawbars, the switches become the controls for percussion and vibrato chorus, and then the knobs above the sliders also will do interesting things. So the interface has a uniform paradigm, with the exception of KB3 mode, which, as I described, the sliders can be used as drawbars. But when you're not using KB3 mode, the sliders are dedicated to functions that you know what they're going to do each patch. Same for the knobs and for the switches. So I'm just going to go over what the assignments are. The first slider to the left is doing filter cutoff. Then you have filter resonance to the right of that. Then you have 2 envelope controls, one for attack, one for release. And then as you move to the right, the last 5 sliders control effects. One is called motion. The next one over is effects 1 and 2, and these will depend on the nature of the sound that you're playing. And then you have delay and reverb. The switches underneath them will turn on and off the effects and turn on and off, again, the filter settings or the envelope settings. So you can preset the faders to where you want and then hit a button and it'll make the effect active. Very cool. The knobs above are also pre-decided what they'll do and uniform across all programs. So you have EQ. Your leftmost knob is a bass shelf. Then you have the next 2 knobs are a parametric midsection with frequency and gain. And then you have a treble shelf to the right. So the first 4 knobs are dedicated to EQ. Then you have knobs that are doing things to adjust the effects. As we said, the first one is motion on the 5th slider over. And this will do motion rate. So you have amount on the slider and then rate on the knob. The same for the effects is true, the same for reverb and delay. So it makes it very simple. Once you understand the assignments, which by the way are silk screened, most of them on the front panel, it's very easy to know what you're doing when you're operating any of the programs. The other cool thing is if you make some changes using these controls, the save light will come on, you can name and save it, and now you have a new preset. Very cool stuff. There's a really nice button called variation that I love because the engineers that created the sounds programmed this variation button to give you something that's going to be very cool behind each of the programs. For example, behind pianos, you're going to hear there's a pad that's added. Behind some of the other sounds, there's some interesting things added as well. So we'll explore some of that. Also under the hood that you don't see evident on the front panel, there are 16 arpeggiators. There are now these new continuous control sequences which allow us to essentially create step sequences of various physical controls or various modulation sources, which is also very deep. Then there's a 16-track sequencer featuring tap tempo right on the front panel, which is nice, transport controls on the front panel. And then you also have the ability to turn on and off your arpeggiators from the front panel and to latch them. So there's a lot to offer on the front panel that you can immediately get to. On the rear panel, a couple of things I want to point out. You have both an A and a B USB connector. The B connector, of course, allows you to plug in a memory stick and store your patches. The A will connect up to your computer and allow you to transfer programs back and forth or to send MIDI or to update your OS from your computer. Of course, you can update your OS also from a thumb drive. So connectivity is built in. You have MIDI ports on the back as well. You have 2 CC pedal inputs on the rear panel, which is great. One you can use, for example, for KB3 mode, for doing organ swell. Maybe the other you use to bring in various layers. Or maybe you want it to be overall volume of the instrument. Then you have 2 foot switch inputs, and these are specialized. They'll accept the continuous sustain pedal, allowing you to do half damper, or they'll allow you to actually plug in a dual pedal assembly as they use a TRS connection, tip ring sleeve. So you could technically have 4 pedals plugged in. Then there's 2 pairs of outputs, which I mentioned before, which are TRS balanced outputs. And then, of course, what I mentioned earlier, the stereo pair of 1/4-inch balanced inputs, in addition to the 1/8-inch input and then headphone jack. Kurzweil also provided the input on the back of the PC4 for the 600 millimeter super ribbon, which is still available and awesome. So now the PC4 can accept the ribbon controller. I love it. I've used it ever since it was developed at Kurzweil. As you might have seen in some previous videos, the Forte with version 4 introduced the 6-operator FM engine, which is also now found in the PC4. This is a true FM 6-operator engine. You can even load sysex files from the internet that were originally developed for the DX7 or TX7 directly into the PC4. You literally just drag the sysex files onto a thumb drive. The machine recognizes them, load them in, and now you're listening to patches that were made, in some cases, 20 or 30 years ago. But you can also do cool things with them. You can modernize them using the super vast extended engine. You can do things like drop FM into the middle of an algorithm, a vast algorithm, and process further the FM through resonant filters. Very, very powerful engine. So we'll get into that in a minute. I'm going to show you some of the great sounds. The first one is a 9-foot German grand. This piano played from this beautiful keyboard sounds wonderful. As I said before, there's always something nice behind this variation button. With a quick push of the variation button, we'll hear a pad behind that same piano now. This isn't considered editing. This is just a modification to the patch. However, the save light comes on. If I wanted to, I could press save, make a new preset, and then when I selected it, the variation button would be on. I'm going to just make some adjustments to the sound as I'm playing. I'm going to go to the 7-foot grand piano, and then I'll just make adjustments using these real-time controls so you can see how powerful that is. So you can see how much modification I made just using the real-time controls on a piano. There's a simple way to split and layer on here too, which is great. And it's a soft key right under the main display. One says split, one says layer. So I'm just going to make some changes again. I'm going to start with an electric piano this time. I'll start with a suitcase. Maybe I'll modify some of the suitcase settings on the fly, and then I'll make a split. And I'll do all of this really without having to enter any menus. It's all right from the front panel. Let's listen to a few more of the electric pianos. They're really well done. There's, of course, tyne and reed electric pianos. There's clavs, there's organs, brass, all of the categories well represented. So we'll just step through a handful of these sounds. I just made a quick layer there with the string section. Listen to one of the tyne electric pianos, very nice. We'll just play a handful more of sounds, and then we're going to start to look at how you combine them into combinations on this instrument referred to as multis. Just a couple more facts that might interest you. A single program, which is Kurzweil's terminology. Some other companies use patch, but in this case, this usually refers to a single sound, but it doesn't have to. In fact, in Kurzweil speak, you can have up to 32 layers per program. And what is a layer? A layer can be a sampled sound. It can be digitally generated waveforms. And then they pass through an algorithm, which is a chain of DSP. And these can be resonant filters, non-resonant filters, non-linear processes. They can be FM in this case now, and pass through then finally a matrix modulation where you can assign controllers to modulate that, and then ends up at an amplifier. That's a single layer. You can have 32 of those in a program. And then your program, each one of those layers in that program can access a separate effect, or the entire program can run through a single effect, or a chain of effects. Then, once you've made what you call a program, you can combine up to 16 of those in a multi. So if your head's starting to spin, I get it. It's really deep, meaning you can pretty much do anything you can dream up. It's a really, really powerful engine. Again, we're going to take a look a little more inside in just a minute. Let's step through one of the other categories and we'll listen to some of the sounds. This one is, of course, there's strings, brass, but I'm going to step over those for the moment. I'm going to go to one that really intrigues me. It's called hybrid. Let's see what's found under the hybrid category. This program is called Alpha Centauri. Love that patch. Very, very cool. If I start to play with the controls, of course, I can do some pretty amazing modifications to it. Let's see what else is under the hybrid category. This one's called ambience. Not to be confused with ambient that you take at night. What a beautiful program. Okay, just a couple more sounds. Let's listen to a few guitars. I know some people have made comment in the past, who plays guitar from a keyboard? Well, many people is the answer. In fact, probably some of the metal bands you go and see that have a keyboard player, you'd be surprised when the guitar player is taking a solo who's keeping the guitar sounds going. So these are a few that are in here. They're quite good. This program gives me an idea to show you something. Kurzweil has a technology they've been using for a long time that allows you to hold notes down with the sustain pedal and then bend only the notes that the key is being held down at that moment by your hand or some other object. So in this case, this warm strata guitar patch, you'll notice that when I bend the bender here, we're going to hear all of the notes bend, not just one note. This would only happen if you use a whammy bar and you press the whole whammy bar down. So now I'm going to turn on this effect called key bend, and we'll hear how only one string will bend, and that'll be the key that I'm holding down. The rest of the keys will be held down by the sustain pedal, won't bend pitch. This makes for very musical performances, especially if you're trying to emulate things like a steel pedal guitar. Very cool stuff. Great basses in here, of course. You have the variety of stand-up acoustic, slap, different kinds of finger, pick. Very cool stuff. I'm going to just show a handful of the drums. There's a lot of programming that went into them. They sound really good. And again, with this 16-track sequencer, or even using the step sequencers, you can create some really cool percussion tracks. That's more of a standard kit, kick and snare for rock. There are so many drum kits in here, it's mind-boggling. But some of them are very modern program. Just play some kick and snare patterns for you. Check this one out. Anyway, you'll have hours and hours and days of exploring the drums. There are so many. And with the variation button and the real-time controls, you can make these kits sound completely different than what I'm playing for you right here. Drop them in one of your sequence tracks, and they're going to sound amazing. Let's jump into listening to some of the combinations now. And again, these are multis. So the way you make a multi on this instrument is very simple. You have 16 different zones. You place one of the programs on a zone. You tell it what key range you want it to play across. You can tell it what kind of curve you want the velocity to respond to, a compressed velocity, expanded, linear. There's all different options to have the keyboard play the way you want. And then you have things like whether you want it to trigger at a specific velocity, high or low velocity. And once you've done this creation of putting sounds across the keyboard and save that, you now have a multi. This is very, very powerful stuff if you're playing live. Each zone can transmit out over USB MIDI or transmit to the local engine or both or to the MIDI ports on the back. So this can really be the centerpiece of a much larger rig if you're controlling a lot of external things as well. Very powerful control. Okay, I'm going to show you a little bit of what goes on under the hood of an instrument like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is press Edit, and we're presented with a screen that's going to show us just the parameters that relate to the program that we're editing. In this case, I'm using a default, just a clear program. Hasn't really been built into anything. But as you scroll down, you can see sustain pedal, sostenuto, what the assignments are. We'll look at a program that's fully developed so you can kind of get the difference. Here's a piano, and you can see filter frequency, sostenuto, attack, release. Again, our assignments, as I said before, these are standardized, what they're assigned to. You can see where the pad volume is, if you want to turn the pad up or down. Again, you just scroll over to the parameter, turn it up or down. This MIDI 31 is the variation button assignment. As we scroll down, we can see, again, all the effects that are assigned and the values assigned to them. We can edit them right here. And now we've just made high-level changes to the program that we're playing. But if you want to really see what is the program made of besides what's controlling it and what are the basic blocks, we just press the More button once, and we'll come to a key map. Key map is showing us the collection of samples. And in the display, it's saying this is the damper pedal, fast damper pedal. So there's damper pedal noise in the piano. If you use these buttons to the left of the display, they'll take us through the 20 layers that make up this piano program. Obviously, the programmer did a lot of fine-tuning to the program. There's pedal release. This is for the pad, violins waiting in the background when we hit the variation button. And these are the piano samples that were used for this piano. And we're looking here at the layer number 20. As we scroll over more to the right, we come to an algorithm button. And this shows us the wiring diagram. As I said before, we start with some sample, or it could be digitally generated waveform. And then it moves through this algorithm. There are many different wiring diagrams. And as you look at them, you'll start to understand that each one of these blocks can have different signals in them, different processes. In this case, I'm selecting a sawtooth wave, or I'm selecting a square or a triangle. In this block, I might select pulse width modulation, or a 3-pole all-pass filter, or parametric EQ. So this is just one wiring diagram. And you can get to see some of the complexity of what's possible just through scrolling through these diagrams, imagining what you might put in these blocks to make up a sound. One of the things that's really important to note is that they didn't stop here. Because you have 32 layers, you can actually route one layer into another layer to make a longer chain. So let's say you just want to use different kinds of filters on a particular sample group, like you take a string section, and then you want to put it through 7 or 8 different kinds of filters. You can do that, some of them in parallel, some of them in series, by chaining layers together. So it's really a modular synthesizer under the hood. I don't want to get too deep into it, but I just want to show you a little bit about what goes on. I'm going to pick a analog synthesizer sound like classic saws. We'll hear it for a second. If I press Edit, we'll notice that our key map is a sawtooth wave. As we look over at our algorithms, we'll see that 5 layers make up this program. They're using a notch filter and a low-pass filter. If we want to look at how they're being modulated, we can go to the DSP mod page, and we can see the notch filter is being run through an LFO controlled by the mod wheel. If we scroll down to the notch width, it's not being modulated. It's set to a flat rate. The low-pass filter is being modulated by an envelope and a slider. Also 2 sliders doing a modulation. So you can get the idea of just how deep There are visual editors that are forthcoming for the PC4, one on a Mac, one on a PC platform, and one for iOS. So you'll be able to see a lot more on a single screen with the external editor as well. But I think it's really important to remember the real-time controls on the front panel give you most of the edits that you want to make to this particular sound. If you're somebody creating a custom-based sound from scratch, it's going to be helpful to know that under the hood, pretty much anything you can dream up, you can do. I'd like to show you a little bit of the FM engine that's under here. So I'm going to scroll back to an FM template. So many sounds. Okay, so here's our FM piano template. And if we press edit, step over to the algorithms, we're going to see a very familiar looking diagram to anyone who grew up with a DX7 or a TX7 or has ever been inside some of the virtual FM plugins that are available for your computer, either in an AX or an AU or a VST format. As I change the algorithm, you can see the wiring diagram change to reflect the type of algorithm that we're using. Below are all the tools that you found to modify FM in the original 6-operator FM instruments. So you have your ratio, or you can have a fixed frequency or a ratio. And this again, as you look at your envelopes, you can also then set them exactly the same way you would if you had programmed on the 6-operator FM instruments. If I go to FM operator, this now allows me to assign velocity to a particular operator. So in my 6 operators, if I'm doing something, let's say like a pseudo Rhodes program or a tyne electric piano, I might want only the biting tyne to respond to my touch and the smoother part not so much. So here I can scale each individual operator to perform to my dynamics the way that I want. I can also modulate them with an incredible amount of depth. So I'm going to go back again, reselect this. We'll hear what they gave you as a template. Well, I hear like a sub-octave in that I don't really want. So I'm going to edit that and bring that operator out. And that's the 3rd operator, I believe. There we go. Let's see, the one that's giving us most of the tyne sound would probably be the 4th one, and we could change the frequency. And the 2nd one as well. So maybe that one we want to respond to velocity. So we can go to our FM operator page, and the sensitivity is set as high as it can go. So we have a lot of sensitivity to it right now. So you can see FM now lives in the Kurzweil. The cool thing is I went on the internet and you'll find thousands of FM patches. I downloaded a whole bunch of them, put them on a thumb drive, stuck them in the back, and voila, they loaded in perfectly. Here's a handful of these programs. Now again, we haven't done anything to dress this up. I think there's a little chorusing on. I'll turn it off. So this is really just stock. But I can do a million things. I can add resonant filters to this. I can make it pan back and forth. I can do things like have the pitch change over time. I can add other envelopes to it to reshape it as well. So really powerful stuff. Here's another. I just got this again from the internet. Let's see why it's so cool to put this in here. I'm going to layer this right now with a grand piano. Just pick a random sound just to see, what does this sound like? Now I could put an arpeggiator on that sound. I could put that sound in a step sequencer and make it play a pattern as a bass line. Very, very cool stuff. Here's another. Well, that patch isn't mono. It's polyphonic, so let's make it mono. And I'm going to put some portamento on it. A little bit less than that. I'm going to make it a legato program so it won't re-attack. I'll make it staccato so it will re-attack. Very, very cool stuff that's very simple to do in this instrument. Here's another program. So you get the idea. And again, this is one layer. I have 32 layers more I can do and add and play with and use and chain together if I want to make this into something you totally would never recognize from its original form, but it would still have an interesting character based on the fact that it's FM and it's generated in real time. It would be able to change and morph over time. I'm going to jump into the CC sequencers, which stands for continuous controller sequencers. Those are really cool. And for every program, every layer, I think it is, you have up to 4 instantiations, 4 different ones of these sequences you can apply. You'll get an idea of what I'm talking about in just a minute. Okay, so we're going to apply a couple of CC sequences to this classic Saws program. I'm going to press Edit and step over to CC sequence, and I'm going to select Simple Filter. And this is now going to be shifting the filter cutoff frequencies by the amounts I've set here. Let's add another one, and we're going to have this apply to the resonance of the filter. And we'll change some of these values. We'll change the clock value to an 1/8 note instead of quarter note. We'll add one more maybe and assign it to panning. Put a couple steps in here. This is one very simple use with 64 steps. If you can assign it to an LFO, it can be changing the LFO depth, it can be changing your reverb time, it can be changing all different kinds of parameters. But I just wanted to see what they can do. Again, these are independent of the 16 arpeggiators and independent, of course, of the multi-track sequencer. So that's a little bit of what's going on under the hood. Hopefully you got something out of that. As I said earlier, KB3 mode is found in here. Look how beautiful the display now reflects your drawbar settings. You now can see exactly what your drawbars are doing. Really, really great. I love this for live playing on stage too, since sometimes it's dark in most cases, or the lights are excruciatingly bright. So the switches underneath are going to do chorus vibrato. I'll just play a little around with this organ model for a moment. You can hear what it does. It's great. I love the organ modeling in here. You can add as much overdrive as you like or as little, and you can totally tailor it to exactly what you're looking for. So that's the Kurzweil PC4. What's not to love? 28.5 pounds with a hammer-weighted action, aftertouch, beautiful interface, and more power under the hood than you possibly can dream of. If you have any questions or need more information, contact your sales advisors at Craft Music. Thanks again for watching, and I'm Chris Martirano.